So we're about to get to the awards, and before we do so, we're going to have our second keynote speaker, Jonathan Greenberg is an investigative financial journalist with 35 years of experience with national publications. He is the founder and editor of the new SonomaIndependent.org and the executive director of its parent media nonprofit, Informing to Empower. Jonathan is a Huffington Post blogger and has been an investigative financial and political journalist for such publications as Forbes, New York, The New York Times, The Washington Post, Mother Jones, Money, Playboy, Self, GQ, The New Republic, The Bohemian, and The Alternate. He is also the author of several well-received books, including Staking a Claim, Jake Simmons and the Making of an African-American Oil Dynasty. Jonathan holds a master's degree in law for investigative journalist from Yale, where he graduated with honors in First Amendment law. And we're very happy that you can be here with us today, Jonathan. So let's give him a warm welcome.
Thank you. I want to thank the San Francisco Peninsula Press Club for the opportunity to speak today about a subject that's been my lifelong passion since I was a 17-year-old reporter in high school in New York City, which is investigative journalism, to ensure the accountability and transparency that's necessary for a free and thriving society. Just last month, one of the best films ever made about journalism hit the theaters. Spotlight is All the President's Men of our time, the most critically acclaimed movie of the year, likely to be the Academy Award winner. Just by show of hands, has anyone seen the movie out there? Yeah, thanks. And others wanting to see it or heard about it? Yeah, it's based on the true story of the Boston Globe investigative reporting team that broke the story of the systematic cover-up of a pedophile priest. What's remarkable about the story is how effectively entrenched powers, in this case the Boston Archdiocese and the Cardinal, could be in co-opting law enforcement and politicians, and all too often the media. As you can see in the film, the scandal, a story that that won a Pulitzer Prize for the Globe and initiated a wave of similar investigations in scores of cities all around the world. The situation that it covered had been going on for decades. What the movie conveys so well is the overwhelming power of the powerful to dictate to the media what a responsible narrative should be, and where a responsible journalist ought to go and not go if he or she is to succeed in their community. In Spotlight, it took Marty Barron, an independent-minded news editor, to take on a story that the Globe had paid little attention to for years. Barron was a classic outsider, a non-Catholic. He had never lived in Boston before, and he was far more committed to his profession than to being liked. During an interview last week about the film, Barron commented, "I do hope it sends a signal to the people getting into this field of work that it's absolutely critical that we do this kind of work. Someone has to hold powerful individuals and powerful entities accountable. And if we don't do it, who will?" In one scene, the leader of the investigative team is reminded of all the good things that the church did for the people of Boston. Taking the scandal public, he was warned, would be damaging to the church and insulting to those of the faith. It would do more harm than it would do good. And that narrative had worked for many, many years on people across the spectrum and decade. The film actually opens in 1975, 26 years before the scandal broke, with a police precinct, well, you can see for yourself, but that doesn't report the crime. He says, "There'll be no arraignment," says the cop at the desk. As the film shows, the role of independent media and investigative reporting is to question the prevailing narrative, not to parrot it. A similar phenomenon is taking place across the country this year, as a long-standing blue wall of deceptive police narratives is being challenged by independent smartphone video by civilians, allied with a newly critical media. An AP article yesterday noted that the number of cases in which police officers are being tried for murder in the United States this past year has tripled to 15. The increase was entirely due to videos like the one depicting the latest cover-up in Chicago, which led to the firing of that city's police chief last week. David Harris, a University of Pittsburgh law professor, observed, what video does is it takes the power of the narrative away from the police to some extent. And that shift in power of control over the narrative is incredibly significant. Those in power will always have their preferred narrative, one that makes them look good, or get reelected, or make more money. They will also use their power to market and defend these narratives. They will use pressure via advertising or the threat of lawsuits, or political pressure, or limiting access when journalists insult them, or social pressure to make the media a megaphone for the powerful. So if we in the media fail to act to create an independent narrative, then we are little better in a sense than stenographers for the rich and powerful. This year, I won the Greater Bay Journalism Awards first prize for an investigative series I wrote for wackobb.net, one of the largest community websites in Northern California. The stories created a new narrative that challenged a decision by a public entity, the Palm Drive District Health Board, to close the only hospital in West Sonoma County. The decision closed an emergency room that served 60,000 people in the community in which I and my family lives, that had saved hundreds of lives for more than 70 years. Palm Drive Hospital had been ranked the #1 safest hospital out of 350 hospitals in the entire state of California by Consumer Reports, just a month before its closing. After years of fiscal mismanagement by a politically connected and highly influential board majority, the closing and a false narrative that a doctor-led alternative to reopen the hospital was impossible, and it was irresponsible. This false narrative was supported by every elected politician in the city of the supposed liberal city of Sebastopol and the West County area, every member of the school board, every former member of the district health board. The last thing the politically powerful hospital district board wanted to see was a narrative that challenged their reasons for closing the hospital and not reopening. The investigative series, which appeared exclusively on the web, was read by more than 15,000 voters in Sonoma County. It challenged the narrative with inconvenient truths at every juncture, assisting in a grassroots campaign, a populist uprising by thousands of people who put "Open Our Hospital" signs on their lawn. In the November 2014 election, a new board majority, a new slate that was opposed by every local politician in the county who had endorsed the majority that wanted to keep it open. The new board majority was voted in despite the politicians' recommendations with a pledge to reopen the hospital. So the new board came to reopen the hospital, and as a result, and millions of dollars of philanthropist funds from the community, the new Sonoma County Medical Center reopened with an emergency room 2 months ago. It is the first time in American history that a small hospital has reopened after closing. I recall the moments when I first realized that the story being sold to the public was a false narrative. I was covering a heated public meeting in which the hospital board voted to reject the doctor-led plan to reopen the hospital just a week before the closing. The financial and legal justifications for rejecting the plan that were being offered, I realized, were simply untrue. This was the investigative reporter's smoke detector that led me to dig deeper and uncover the fire of a faulty, deliberately misleading narrative. It was this narrative, entirely absent from all other media coverage about the hospital, that the Palm Drive District Board was intent on keeping from the public. My stories revealed a number of highly inconvenient truths, including the truth about the federal bankruptcy law, the truth about the advice to the board and the public of a bankruptcy attorney whose law firm also secretly represented Wells Fargo Bank, the bond trustee for the hospital bonds, the truth about the likely violation of the Brown Act in deciding to close the hospital before a single public meeting was had. The Brown Act exists, by the way, to stop an act like this from happening without public hearing and an opportunity to offer an alternative or find an alternative to closing an emergency room. And yet they did it in secret, and then they needed a special dispensation from the state health board, which says you have to wait 90 days before closing a hospital so that they could close it in 20 days. And the biggest false narrative was that the viability of that a doctor-led plan to reopen was impossible and irresponsible, even though there were doctors and funders ready to say, don't close, we're ready to go with it. The series started at a major weekly newspaper, but it was killed by the editor of that publication, who I won't name today, as it was being laid out after a call from a member of the district board complaining that I was an impartial reporter and they should not print this story, with the implicit threat that a very well-heeled Wells Fargo bank could take that newspaper to court and without even proving anything, could literally put the newspaper out of business just through the cost of defending a libel suit that had no merit. Thank goodness for independent web media. I contacted Wacko BB, a widely read community forum. Let's discuss the story with the editor, Barry Chertoff. He agreed to work with me on it. The initial story spread across the web through social media. It received 27,000 views, more than 60 comments. When I asked him recently why he was willing to defy the political establishment and publish the series, he replied, because it seemed like an important story, and because I hate to get intimidated. Like the Spotlight series, and like most of our investigative reporting, my article could not have been written without the unsung heroes of our profession. Courageous sources willing to defy the powerful by coming forward and telling their story. You see that in the Spotlight movie. In our case, it was doctors, business leaders, former patients, even Sebastopol's police chief, who was concerned about the secrecy of the decision to close and its impact on emergency services and the people who would die as a result of it. Sebastopol's fire chief also started with a public statement, but literally called me to request that I withdraw it under pressure from the city council, which paid his salary. Although I provided hyperlink, footnotes, and video for all the reporting in the hospital series, the area's typically professional newspapers never picked up the troubling news that it reported. The leading weekly in the area, eager to appease its advertisers and political friends, added new distortions to the mix, which I exposed at the end of this series in a column about that newspaper's vendetta to oppose the hospital's reopening. My work on the story led not just to the series, but also to the creation at the beginning of this year of our new community website, the Sonoma Independent, and our parent nonprofit, public interest media organization, which we call Informing to Empower, which sort of encapsulates what the objective, our objective in the media is: to inform a community, to empower it, to change decisions and find new solutions to problems that we have in our community. Our stories have moved the needle on issues like the continued Monday closing of the most underfunded library system in Northern California, despite the wealth of Sonoma County. Our district attorney's secret war on marijuana. The unreported 23% rise in just 4 years of funding for prison and probation in our supposed liberal county, despite falling crime rates. And the failure of Sonoma County cities to walk their talk on climate change by refusing to purchase electric vehicles for their city fleets, in spite of resolution after resolution by city councils that that's exactly what they're going to do. We're part of a growing trend in investigative reporting, nonprofit media organizations that exist to go deeply into issues often unreported by a resource-challenged corporate media. These include excellent new homes for investigative reporting like ProPublica, the Texas Tribune, and the Bay Area's California Watch from the Center for Investigative Reporting. We're working to sustain a media that champions the public interest by raising public awareness of issues and public pressure for solutions that can make a difference. We even accompany our exposés with an Informing to Empower What You Can Do petition widget on the pages where the articles appear. that can also send emails to those in power if people choose. As demonstrated in the Spotlight film, reporting that brings greater transparency and accountability is often seen by those with power as confrontational. I like to think of it as being constructive instead of compliant. I did not become a journalist 35 years ago to be a stenographer for politicians, advertisers, or county sheriffs. Like many in this room, I became a journalist to uncover and tell the truth, to raise awareness of issues, possibilities, and solutions that most people are not aware of. To do my small part in bringing public pressure to bear for change that serves the public interest. We are all in this together. Being an investigative reporter is not always easy. It's not always comfortable, and it most certainly does not pay well. But a robust, independent, questioning media serves a unique role in providing a voice to the voiceless, a check and balance to the powerful, and a vision of new possibilities, all of which are necessary for a thriving, free society. It is an honorable and noble vocation, one that we can all be proud of. Thank you.